Welcome back to the Builders of the Broken Bazaar. I'm your host, Dr. Tabish Zaman. And I'll tell you, and I'll have to tell you, that we live in an age where migration, entrepreneurship, and inequality, they're deeply entangled. Now, we must have heard politicians, press, policymakers, they all talk about skilled labor shortages and innovation ecosystem. But refugees, migrants, and women, they continue to be left out of this very story, despite being some of the most resilient groups we've seen around. Now, as of April 2025, UNHCR that reports the number of forcibly displaced people, those driven from their homes by conflict, violence, or human rights violations, has climbed to 122.1 million, which is a record high. That means nearly 1 in every 67 people on this earth is living in displacement. Yet, migrants, refugees, and displaced entrepreneurs, they alone contribute to an estimated of 9.4% of the global GDP. So why are they still being treated as if they don't count? And during COVID-19, research by today's guest showed that migrant and refugee entrepreneurs, especially women, they were hit harder, but they adapted really fast. Yet they had the least support around them. So, what does that tell us about the group of individuals we as a society value and why? So, my guest today, she has dedicated her entire career at this very intersection. She has rethought what entrepreneurship means in diverse and often overlooked contexts. Dr. Alexandra David. She's a sociologist at the Institute of Work and Technology in Germany, where she leads research on migration, innovation, and entrepreneurship. She's also a founding member of the Business Dialogue, NRW, a center which is committed to advancing multicultural and migrant entrepreneurship. Now, this is not over yet. She's also a contributor to Ashoka's Hello Europe Migrant Entrepreneurship Cluster. Her work is driven by the conviction that entrepreneurship is not just an economic activity, which very well aligns to the theme of what we are trying to do here on this podcast. But she's also trying to tell us that there's a pathway to dignity, empowerment, and inclusion. She believes in uncovering the hidden strength within refugee and migrant communities, in amplifying the role of women, and in building that ecosystem that are really inclusive in every sense as they are innovative. So, from exploring the geography of migrant and refugee entrepreneurship to revealing how informal and formal economies overlap across the borders. Dr. Davis' research is both rigorous, powerful, challenging us to see entrepreneurship as a force of social transformation. How grateful I am. Alexandra, welcome to the Builders of the Broken Bazaar.
Thank you for having me, Tabish. Thanks for the invitation.
So, Alex, let's start. I believe you studied communication, economics, sociology, which has all culminated in your PhD on human capital and network.
Yes.
So, looking back, what was that spark which pushed you to bring migration on one hand and innovation together as your lifelong focus?
That's interesting. I started working directly after my communication studies, and I've been first in some communication press, agencies. And then, I just started at this research institute, and here I am 24 years later. And so we've been very much focusing regional studies. And my focus very soon, don't ask me why, because I strongly believe that being a migrant myself, it was all about innovation and migration in a spatial entity. So I strongly believe that there is something like or there should be an agenda for each region, having a pool of humans from all over the world working together And as we know from migrant entrepreneurs, for instance, very often they bring forward regional innovations. So for me, it was clear. But first, I started, and it was very much about labor market integration, to be honest. But I was very disappointed after a time because I wrote my PhD in the Netherlands, and I could see that Germany or Netherlands, no difference. Labor market integration was really a huge one. So you could see all these barriers. Nothing happened over time. And then I can't even tell you, but I can remember that in 2017 already my PhD promoter and we've been talking about migrant and refugees as entrepreneurs, and we could see how much power there was. But all the studies, and until today, as you know, we very much regard these kind of groups as victims, just victims. And for me, it was even a kind of funny to me because I grew up as a Polish girl in Germany, and I've been to this networks of Russian people, Polish people, Turkish people. None of them looked like the victim being an entrepreneur. Uh, no, they were just like proud people doing business, very often multiple businesses. And yeah, it was quite confusing to me. And this is why I just started to ask myself, what's in it? And I started the research. Yeah, that's it. Here we are now.
I'm so glad you spoke about changing that narrative when it comes to refugees and migrant entrepreneurs. Now, in one of your studies recently, you've looked at how migrants and refugees basically they straddle two worlds. And when I say two worlds, I'm talking about informal and the formal. And sometimes that could be even countries. So you mentioned Netherlands, you mentioned Turkey, you mentioned Russia. So what I'm coming to is your hybrid business model and how they're already keeping the communities going, communities afloat. Although, again, when we're talking about politicians and policymakers, they don't see it as real contributing meaningful entrepreneurship. So, with an example, could you tell our audience what it basically means and what it means on the ground, that idea of hybrid business model?
Yeah, sure. So very often people think, like, very similar to this victimization of migrant entrepreneurs or refugee entrepreneurs, that hybrid business models are are necessity driven and not opportunity driven. I have several examples. It's not like that, so I know many people who, for instance, work several years in Germany in a dependent contract. So they were part of the official labor market, but on site, because there was a possibility, they were building businesses in Poland. It was not illegal. It was not informal. It was just a site, and being safe in a safe place, they just then shut down the labor market parts in Germany and moved completely to Poland. While then, some years later, they just returned in a sense, were searching for a German co-founder and, transformed or translated the business model into a German context and work in between those worlds. And this is something very often is not seen, or is very often labeled as informal, illegal. It is a kind of shady, and this is, I'm sure there are some shady people out there. And yes, there are people out there who are informal, illegal, whatever, But very often people just try them out. And this is like one of the possibilities when we have a look at the mixed embeddedness of Klostermann and Rath. we know that there are different possibilities out there, and different structures and different networks specifically for migrants and refugees they can use. And this is just, like opportunity driven entrepreneurship. Very fine. Like if people want to do that, it's great. And then it's just, as a politician, or, in this political context, we just need to think about it, what to do with that in terms of taxes, employees, and so on and so forth. But we are ignoring it a lot, I would say, at the moment. Yeah.
But I think your work pushes that conversation in a very nice way. And when I read that paper, it really made me think and ask again, which I thought I'll save it for this podcast, in terms of how it really challenges the people who are responsible at the top when it comes to the funders, when it comes to the policymakers, and how it assigns the legitimate, or what I may say, legitimacy entrepreneurship, which might not be a word, but then it gives that autonomy to these individuals to choose between necessity and opportunity driven entrepreneurship, if I'm correct.
Yeah. So I just can talk about the German context, and I'm sure that in Germany, not many people. I mean, if you are not aware of things like that, you don't really care. I would even go one step further. I would say that the German field, specifically when it comes to entrepreneurship, is not very open until now. So, like, I don't want to say it's challenging to start a business here, but sometimes I have a feeling, yeah, people do not welcome entrepreneurs as they should. So, what would it mean then to go there and have a look at specific kinds of entrepreneurship like that one? But at the same time, I'm just wondering, because we are talking about Bologna, we are talking about open borders within Europe, and nothing happens in terms of such business models. So yes, of course it's challenging. But first and foremost, I guess it's challenging because each country is very much organized by itself. And because if you have a look, for instance, I wrote my PhD in the Netherlands. I had to have a recognition in Germany to to so that I can use the doctor title here in Germany. So yeah, if this happens already in the scientific context, that's clear it happens in any other context too. And I think that's one of the main challenges we have in Europe, which is and maybe there is a kind of, I don't want to go there too deep, but maybe it's also kind of ignorance, just like in sense of being ignorant to the fact that some people choose the way of living in such hybrid business models. But yeah, we just move. Yeah, we just like, we don't see the learning effects that, yeah, each country could have. And we just try to, yeah, here once again, we just try to put it in a very strange direction, and it's more a challenge, it's more a problem than it's an opportunity. This is what I think. Yeah.
So is it, when you talk about the openness or lack of openness,
Yeah.
does it come down, despite so much studies out there and despite migration being a historical thing, whether that is within the Europe or outside the Europe, um, where could we point our fingers? And again, I'm not asking this to blame a particular system, but I'm asking, as researchers, you and me, where should we be looking to open that openness, if that makes sense, to make it work? And especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, as you see, a lot of European countries, they are struggling with their productivity, and refugee and migrant entrepreneurs could be a source of it. So is it a case where we are approaching it in a very, very different way, and no one seems to be interested in taking up that conversation?
Yeah, first, so I think there are, different routes. First of all, as I said, specifically for Germany, you don't have high numbers of people who are willing to be self-employed in Germany in general. So but there are high numbers of migrants and refugees, specifically migrants. In the statistics, you don't have that much division between migrants and refugees, but mainly people who come into Germany. And so, first of all, I think, yes, that the focus of the last 20 years or 10 years on productivity, specifically the startup bubble, which I call it, was really exhausting, to me at least. And I very much appreciate people who work in that bubble. And I mean, it's a big party, and I understand that. And I'm going to that party from time to time too. And I don't want to devaluate it. But let's be real. I mean, in the outside world, in the real life, and I hope very much that many researchers still are out there in the streets. I mean, this is a big hope for me. Sometimes I have a feeling myself, I even detach. But if you go out there, you are not crowded by startups. Let's be real. These are just everyday entrepreneurs, normal people who do services to you, or give services to you, or any other things. And so, the obsession with startups, the obsession with growing, the obsession with productivity, I can understand it, and I fully support the idea that, for instance, as for migrant, but also for any other entrepreneurs, we should, have specific, maybe mentoring programs, how to become more productive. For instance, how can you employ more people? How can you grow over time? But, also topics on insolvency, like be prepared, things can go wrong. And you should do that very early on so that people are not afraid to fail, to lose, things like that. But this obsession is stopping us a little bit. And also the fact that, for instance, in the Eastern European communities, I cannot say everywhere, but for instance, in my home country, Poland, being a businessman, this is something that is like, being valued, being someone who is, who has specific characteristics, attributes, someone who is moving forward, want to change something, very positive. I have the feeling here it's like, oh, you are an entrepreneur. And what are you doing? And if people say, I'm just, I run a kebab shop. Oh, yeah, it's a kebab shop. I understand. It's not AI based. It's not knowledge intensive. It has a strange connotation to that. And it's a pity. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that was so well put. And this is where I know you're so big on, and some of your work really focuses on how entrepreneurship should be looked at from a different context. And again, this comes down to, you mentioned Poland, you mentioned here in the Western world, or the Western Europe, or America even for that matter. So you argued that where you live, it really matters, isn't it? And that all comes down to the contextualization of how we look at refugee and migrant business. What is allowing them to thrive, or what is holding them back?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is a strange idea. We think that we are the helpers. I don't think they need our help. This is what I say to everybody. I mean, the people I know, I don't want to say they don't care about our help. They are happy if they meet people, a helping hand, like every entrepreneur needs a helping hand. But, something, since the long summer of migration, we call the long summer of migration the summer or the years between 2015, 17 here in Germany. this is an attitude like we need to help everybody, like we need to show them how world is going on. I mean, sorry, but all these people had lives before us and will have after us. And it is just a strange point of view to give them any mentoring programs on, yeah, strange things, how to run a business. I mean, I'm fine with all that. But on the other hand, what these people very often mean, and let's be real, there is science on this. They need, of course, finances. They need, of course, I don't know, a location, where to start, a business idea and business plan, blah, blah, blah. But what they need most is specific networks that are very often not open to them as groups. They need knowledge. How is entrepreneurship understood and run in a specific context, in a specific country? How can I talk to my customers? What is well received, what is not so well received? Maybe I need to think about different strategies. They need to know how to approach institutions. Very often we hear, okay, these people, have challenges with institutions and are discriminated. And yes, they are. And there is also research from our side on that. On the other hand, you just to have imagine a German guy sitting somewhere and, giving stamps all day long, and it's his procedure. He has to stick to it. And then you need to, to bring both sides together, say to Klaus, look, Klaus, I don't know, here's Mohammed, and he needs a stamp really very fast. And Mohammed needs to tell, and Klaus, sorry, needs to tell Mohammed, look, Mohammed, if you need that, please plan some weeks before, because there is a kind of procedure I need to stick to. You see, so you have to be aware of both sides. At the moment, or the last, I would say 10 years, what we are doing, or I was doing too, very much focusing on one side, on Mohammed's side, to understand him, to push him, to bring. But there is also Klaus. And if I leave Klaus behind, and if I don't care about him, we are in this area where populism is coming in. And here we are, by the way. And now let's try, to remove that in a sense. So I'm very much about programs addressing both sides, bringing both sides together. And you wouldn't believe, I mean, people are very open for that one if you start, right? Yeah.
I think your work is absolutely brilliant in terms of how you focus the lens. But then you highlight a very important aspect here. I mean, here we were studying entrepreneurship, which is meant to transform a lot of different things, but we brought bureaucracy in it, like you mentioned about the stamp.
Yeah.
But it also talks about integration again, which I know you big on integration and belongingness.
Yes.
Um,
Love it.
and I feel that's the essence of how real entrepreneurship can actually thrive, especially in the Western world, because we are talking about migrations and refugee, a group of community which really require that support, not just in terms of the business, but in terms of the society as well. So I will take you to your own research in
Yeah.
terms of during the pandemic, COVID-19, which we don't want to hear anymore. But you studied how these group of individuals were really impacted, and you found they were really hit hard. And again, it was the same here in United Kingdom as well. But then you highlighted how incredible their adaptability was. They kept finding ways to keep their businesses alive. They were not part of most of the support scheme. So if we go back to the Mohammed, they were not part of the most support scheme. But what I want to know from your own words, what really stood out from that research beyond that adaptability when it comes to resilience, when it comes to going on as far as on enterprise is concerned?
to make a long story short, I would say that first of all, there is a big difference between men and women in general, also in migrant and women and men. So, what is not surprising to anybody doing, entrepreneurship studies is that women were less rational, which does not mean, like they were bad or they were different than men in terms of running a business, but men were searching for very strategic solutions, and women in general were very much caring for the business, the employees, how to pay them, how to bring their families during this crisis, and how to be healthy at the end of the day. I like mean in sense of the well-being. Okay, but specifically migrant entrepreneurs, I think that it's all about community building and also being international. Like very often they came up with new ideas. They could see that were, for instance, already running in other countries, and they had a family member on the phone, and they heard how they could maybe adapt this business idea to the German context, and this is what they have done. So yeah, very often it's really this transnational way of life. While we need to be really very specific here, it's not the transnational business running, because very often it's not the business that is transnational. It's just simply registered in Germany and not in two different international contexts. But the transnational way of the entrepreneur, the also the resilience being like built on the fact being a migrant was very helpful. Like many of them told us stories like, what, I had a very hard migration history. I was fleeing not only for 1 year, but I was in transit countries. I was building there my entrepreneurship. I had to rebuild it here in Germany. I don't really care. For me, this crisis is just a crisis. We just need to focus on the most important things and just go and just move forward. And so I think this is a very often something that maybe migrant populations bring with them. It's like this migration history that very often, and let's be real, breaks us. Like I'm also broken in a sense, but on the other hand, you've done it, right? And also all these discrimination, like being this Polish girl at school, and then if you grew up or you become an entrepreneur, okay, I left this behind, I can just restart anytime. And this is something that was very much we could see that with migrant entrepreneurs during the COVID-19 crisis. But I think in general, we see that these populations as entrepreneurs are very often very innovative in sense how to move forward, very resilient, and very full of ideas, full of really tricky ideas, by the way. And I love it. I have so many to say about that, like how they run businesses and how they like very legally use transnationality. It's so beautiful, like it's crazy. You're like Alice in Wonderland if you're there and you're like, give me more. I want to know more about that one. It's great. I love it.
And it's like diving into their mindset, isn't it? What you mentioned about crisis after crisis, the way they negotiate the crisis, it tells us something about entrepreneurial mindset, and we can learn a lot from it. Now, as researchers, like you said, you know, we are in Alice in Wonderland, in a candy shop where we want to hear more stories.
Yeah.
But then, how do we actually transform that story or transform those. Like I said, I study entrepreneurial mindset as well, where I talk about cognition, behavior. But why don't policymakers look at it and they say, look at the resilience, look at the entrepreneurial mindset? And again, I'm not talking about just as an outcome to producing a business or creating a business, but then that could be really, really helpful when the social fabric of the community is really, at the lowest standards as of now. That could really help, isn't it? To celebrate the kind of mindset which comes into it and then be a part of the society. And we all will benefit. Like you mentioned about Klaus and you mentioned about Mohammed coming together, and we could produce some wonderful things together, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But then just ask yourself, for instance, then you have to go down the rabbit hole, right? Because to be very honest, what we are working on now, like you've mentioned it already, is the sense of belonging. It's a psychological concept. Okay, first of all, it says to belong somewhere is essential. It's like eating, drinking, whatever. You need, as a person, to belong somewhere, to someone, to something. So, how do you want to translate that? For instance, in the current studies, we found out. So, at the moment, we are very much working or looking into the Afro-German community in Hamburg, by the way. So, the initial thoughts or the initial findings, I don't know if this will, be a big picture, but what we see here specifically, and this is not new to entrepreneurial studies, but we see it again, that Afro-German male entrepreneurs, if they struggle with belonging, if they feel like, okay, they don't want me here, there are some specific barriers, outspoken challenges, it's not about money, it's not about location, there is something, I don't feel it. What they do, they, for instance, in terms of agency, just search for a German co-founder. Very easy. Like they found a German co-founder and they start the business. Like the German co-founder is the link, the belongingness between the German ecosystem or the Hamburg ecosystem and the male Afro-German entrepreneur. Okay. With Afro-German female entrepreneurs, it's totally different. When they see there are any, like silent barriers, they cannot push, like they don't feel they are part of something. What they do is they withdraw, they just go away, and they return to the ethnic networks. Like they go back to the Afro-German community and they search for the roots. Yeah.
So that's the part which you're referring to as part of your research in your gendered recovery, where you talk about how women entrepreneurs from that community, they often leaned on the network and the community ties
Yeah.
in a very different way as compared to men,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes, and maybe okay. This is what what I did not answer, where I did not answer the question directly is what I can even understand. Like policymakers, what to do with that? Like I mean, you run the door and you say, okay, I found out now why it's not working, why the ecosystem is not connected to female migrants, entrepreneurs, because there is something like the sense of belonging, and they are like, okay, let's talk about productive entrepreneurship. And you're like, but we cannot be productive if we don't feel like if we don't feel like being welcomed somewhere, we cannot be productive. We cannot connect and we cannot embed. And embeddedness for me is like I don't want to say the end point, it sounds a bit strange, but it's like the roots. And you don't have roots if you can't connect, and because you don't have the sense that you would like to connect. You don't feel it, and people don't feel you. And so what to do? what to do with that? Let's be real. I mean, policymakers, they don't have time. They just don't have the understanding. They want to have numbers. So instead of policymakers, it are the networks, it are, the diasporas and other constructs today also, like web-based networks, or who knows it, or you name it, that like a in between the official ecosystem and the migrant entrepreneur themselves. So it's like yeah, but it's always a liminality stage, these
Mhm.
people are always in between, which is a pity. Yeah, and this is very often also in the second generation. They spark it, it's something nobody talks about. You enter the room and everybody is totally open, and they make some jokes, and then they figure out, oops, the joke, on Polish people is maybe a bit strange because you're Polish yourself, things like that. I don't want to say it's microaggression, and I don't want to say, everybody is intentional. No, it's not. But yeah, very often, if you aggregate such experiences, then these people just say, "Okay, I'm just leaving, doing my work somewhere else." Some of them even leave Germany.
So someone has to, likes of yourselves, you have to change that narrative, change that conversation, bring that. And I feel that will come out. I know we are quick to blame policymakers or people around us, but then you and me both belong to an institute, which is research as well as teaching. In order for us to change that conversation, we need to move out of some of the case studies, some of the research work. Like you said, a big party, that party which goes on.
Yeah,
We need to look at those party more critically, and
yeah,
then start talking about, or again, move away from that startup culture or Silicon Valley case studies, as we may call it, and stop ignoring these everyday fragile, powerful form of work which refugees and migrants, these individuals, these Mohammeds who do with Klaus together, isn't
yeah,
it? If that makes
yeah,
sense, because that's very, very important. And you continue to do that throughout your work. Like I said, I spent a lot of time looking at your paper and looking at some of the projects which you've been part of, and you talk about human capital. You really do, where you talk about skills, diversity, knowledge, how it all makes the region where you are, so you're in Germany, how that makes that place resilient, not just for Klaus but also for Mohammed. So if you are advising a group of open-minded policymakers today, what would you tell them about an inclusive regional ecosystem? And I don't want to lose it out in complex word, but what would you tell them about the ecosystem which is inclusive in every sense to refugees and migrants?
yeah. First of all, I would say that they should value every entrepreneur, like every, not splitting up in groups. Then what I would like to see is that, the if you go in this discourse theory of Foucault, you always run one mainstream blah blah, and this positive, what Foucault is called, like the side discourses, are not very much focused. But let's be real, the side discourse is, if you stick to theory and you see that in societies, migrants, and then, per se migrant entrepreneurs, they have a specific position in the narrative, they, in the society. But all the time the narrative is they have to stick there and they are victims and we need to help them. But think about it, what we said. They are resilient, they are transnational, very often not in their business doing, but as business people. They are, very creative, and they are willing to start businesses more often than native people here in Germany. You always have to have a look at the context. And also in the second generation, and this is beautiful, they want to give back something to society. You have so many beautiful people in the second generation running like social entrepreneurs, businesses. Okay. So what happens now is, and this is where our focus stops. I have the feeling it stops. We are like, oh yeah, they are victims, they are in these positions, and deprived regions, deprived areas, deprived neighborhoods. But very often, this is an opportunity for them. Like they are sitting there, we've been running studies, for instance, in Duisburg-Marxloh, which is deprived. It's a city, Duisburg, it's a city in the rural area, and Marxloh is a neighborhood, and everybody is, or the main narrative is that people are afraid to go there, wow, it's full of crime. But it's full of bright shops. These people are selling the whole bright industry, in the streets. You see international people, international brides coming to buy a bride clothes, to buy furniture, to buy whatever. You sense it. And then if you ask the people, okay, do you feel like a victim? You are here in this deprived neighborhood. And they're like, huh? No. What we've done is we bought all these houses as a community. We just make them look nice. Our streets are like really good because we take care of them. Because if we have customers here, we want to have it nice here. And with the bright clothes, we just buy them in Turkey or in some Arabic states. And then because it's cheaper, and we bring them here and we can sell them, with other prices. And so this is why we can run so many businesses in parallel here. So is this something that looks like a victim? I don't think so, So what do I mean with this example is just we need to go there. We need to go into these areas. I am so much, and I'm so full of hope, and there are so many people out there I know who go there, who go into these areas, who try not to have prejudices, who try to be full of respect, who sit down with them, who don't tell in the first sentence that they have a doctor title and they are here because they want to know how things run, No, they go there, and if I go there, I try to be very, like, from my mindset, very innocent. I try to erase everything I knew before. I try to be with respect. I try not to make it about my research or myself, but about them. Because at the end of the day, very similar to the startup community, the research community is a big party sometimes, It's all about titles and, acknowledgements. But just think about it. Whom do we own this? And this is to the subject we do research on. In my case, these are migrant entrepreneurs. I'm sorry, I don't want to say subjects, but you know what I mean by that. So these people are something I have so much respect and so much I'm so much thankful, because every time I reach out to someone, they don't tell me their entrepreneurial journey only. They are telling about their lives. So they share their life with a stranger, and this is what makes me very thankful and I feel very much honored that I mean, meanwhile, we run with also with the colleagues of University of Bremen. Like we've almost reached 100 interviews with migrant entrepreneurs all over Germany. This is crazy, you know. And I can remember so many of them. I will never forget. And they have my mobile numbers, by the way, and I have theirs. And it's beautiful.
Alex, I think you're sending a very, very strong message, and which is rightly so, which is what we are trying to do here to both young researchers and researchers who are out there, both within the academia and outside, in terms of moving away from an extractive form of research where you go in. Of course, you've seen a problem from a theoretical point of view, and of course, you see everyone's jumping on that. You go in there with a mindset, you collect that data, you get out, publish your paper, be it at the conference, and your job is done. But like I said, you have, in such a strong way and such a nice way, you have explained to young researchers and researchers all over how we need to move away from romanticizing that problem where we go in, but then it's much more about what they have achieved. It's about who they are. It's about understanding who they are. And again, it ties in with what you have been constantly talking about, that connectedness, that embeddedness. If we understand that, our society would be much, much better that way. And that's why we are doing this research, isn't it?
Yeah, it is absolutely. And it is, I mean, I just can say to all these young researchers, I'm turning 48 this year, so, you know, but I can say to all these young researchers, just go out there, be like, sometimes I have the feeling we forgot in this research bubble to be curious, you know? It's about curiosity. You want to know what it's about. You want to dive deep. You want to take time. And I can understand that, you know, all this strange contracts and all this strange academia thing sometimes is moving you away from what you should go for. And then I just would like to remind them you're in such a great privileged situation because you don't need to become an activist. You don't you don't need to be too much involved, you know, in sense of action research you are, but not too much. So you go in, but you can dive into your own personality again. And then you can take the time to discuss openly, internationally. And I wish that people would go back to a fruitful discussion, not only criticizing like, yeah, you forgot to do this and that, you know, just, just let it be for a second. Just let it influence you. How do you feel about it? Yes, I know now some people will just stop watching this and say it's not about feelings. And the end of the day, let's be real, it's not about numbers only. So, you know, like we have this big privilege to do so. And then maybe we can change the narrative. Maybe we can dive into it, and also we shouldn't polarize in the sense that we are blind to the blind spots. You know, of course there are challenges, of course there are informal and even illegal migrant and any other entrepreneur. Of course it's like that, but maybe this is also a chance to have a you know, deep dive into that one. You know, why is this? And very often we can then learn that even if things are informal or a little bit illegal, these people are sometimes maybe good entrepreneurs. We just need to have, you know, like we just need to pick them at a specific point and push them into, you know, the official realm where they can flourish and they can, you know, further develop their entrepreneurial activities.
The intent, if I may say so, the intent. We look at their intent. But
Yes.
going back to the talking about the young researchers and their approach to getting into communities like this or taking on a research of this nature, don't you think we as seasoned researchers are also to blame for that? Again, I don't want to point fingers, but that is an approach they learn from us,
Yes.
where we show them this is how a journey of a particular project runs. So you're meant to do this, this, this. And at the end of it, of course, publication is very important. Going to that particular conference is very, very important. So it automatically tunes their approach to how they conduct research, especially in these circumstances, especially around these contexts. But it requires an approach like yours, isn't it, Alexandra, where you need to sit down with your people. You need to really spend some time and understand before you start thinking about your own issues or your own objectives.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yes, of course, everybody, we are part of that. It's a system, that's another story here. But yeah, and I know it's a system. And it's a pity because just look at myself. I did my PhD at the age of 34, 5, which is very late. Like people are, oh, crazy. Oh, why didn't you start at 27? Sorry, 26, 27. I was just a little girl. I'm sorry to all the people out there. I didn't know what I want in life. I never thought about a research career, and until today, I don't think I'm the big researcher on this planet. I'm just, trying to, to go with the flow. And yes, of course, I am strategic where I need to be, and I am open about it that I teach my younger colleagues things I did not know, to be very open. I simply did not know. I was very naive, and there are people out there being also naive. But the system is really about people who are very strategic, moving fast forward, and people who dive deep. They are the one, being left behind sometimes. Not always, sometimes. That's a pity because these people, they have to say several, many deep things, and yeah. I also very much would like to welcome a research that burns itself down from time to time. So, for instance, with me, yes, of course, I also had the feeling migrant entrepreneurs for a long time, we need to help. And now I'm burning that down a little bit. And I'm like, if we want to have a look at power relations, power dynamics, whatever you call it, in an ecosystem, it needs to be a look at both sides. We cannot, you cannot assume something like, I assume migrant entrepreneurs are like this, and then you search, you go through your data and oh, I found it. This was very much with this connectedness paper we wrote. We were searching for a specific thing and we did not find it. Whatever we did with the data, these people were just not connected at all. I'm sorry. And then you have to sit down and say, okay, I just need to think about it. Damn, they are not connected. What to do about it now? And this is, there are many, also elder researchers out there working very much now on changing the landscape, and I believe we need some time. But it's not only about conferences, and it's not only about, the same studies all over again. It's just you need to take time to dive into some things. And also, let's not forget, and this is what I love totally about the Dutch culture, I got to know. My PhD promoter, he always said, with a PhD, your career is not finalized. You're not dead after that. You then just start, so start. The PhD is just like you start afterwards. Okay. Today, many people think, I have a PhD now. I'm an expert. I know everything. They have the same message all over. just start, just forget. I mean, just put yourself aside a little bit. Don't take it so seriously. Just go there, drink a tea or a coffee at a bazaar, talk to the people. Don't be afraid to, and also don't be afraid to hear counter narratives. If they tell you this is, I don't want to say a bad word here, but this is stupid what you're saying. This theory, it does not fit, then just take it as it is, go home and talk, I don't know, to your husband, your wife, your friend, and maybe then you realize it's just the brain fog or just a strange idea you had, which I also have from time to time. But it's good to be in the streets because very soon you find out if you had just a bad day or a daydream, or if you find what you thought in real life settings. That's really important here. Yeah.
You're brilliant, Alex. I think you put it so well. And I've been given the same message by people I worked with. And when I was doing my PhD, the type of people surrounded me and the work we did together is the start of a new journey. And you will have cases when you'll find yourself really, really stupid
Yeah.
and you'll be asking yourself all sorts of questions. But look, Alex, coming back to you, how much you've achieved, and I know you played down, but in terms of your publication, in terms of your funding, in terms of, more importantly, I would say your intent, which is what makes you very different to other researchers in this area. Your intent is out there. You wear your heart on your sleeve and you're out there doing what you love doing. Now, I won't let you escape without talking about another inclusivity which you've spoken about, which you've written about, and you've spoken about the entrepreneurial education for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And you've made a very strong case for social innovation when it comes to their inclusion.
Yeah.
So, my broad question to you there is, I want people to read your work and I want people to be interested in what you're doing and how you've really shaped your trajectory. But if you wanted people to act on your research tomorrow, what is it that one concrete thing which they would take differently or they start doing differently to support different group of people who are not included in our narratives? And I'm talking about refugee, migrant, of course, that's the whole idea. But then people with disabilities, women entrepreneurs, not enough. So, what do you think your research could teach anyone taking a notice of that?
First of all, and that's, the most important is that don't try to help people who don't want your help, In terms of, sometimes I have the feeling that we try to push people also in some activities like migrant and refugee entrepreneurship. It's all over, everybody needs now to be an entrepreneur. But some people, they just simply don't want. That's the first one. The second one is just listen to them. Some want to do it full time. The others want to do it half time. Any others want to do it, I call it home based, like, sitting at home and doing something. The others want to do it local based. And the others want to be the big stars. That's also one. So it's not something that we should generalize. And when it comes to ecosystems, I don't want to start that everything is, tailored for this white, middle-aged man. We are discriminating that guy, and I'm sorry for him a little bit, because I think at the end of the day, he is not discriminating other groups at all. It's the system, and I think very often, and this is my experience, if you ask this middle-aged white man, he's very open very often, and he wants to help. If you want the help, he will tell you, but sometimes he will tell you things you don't like you may be too emotional, too loud, like just try to calm down a little bit. It's a good tip. I mean, to be very honest, if you are shouting all the day, like I do very often, or you are too enthusiastic, you don't have the leadership in you then. So I don't know if we should just, and sometimes I'm really sorry for this kind of like prototype, this white middle-aged man. I'm so sorry for him. And if we let him be, and if we listen sometimes to his advice, or listen again to his advice, we give him the chance. I don't think that, yeah, these people are discriminating too much. Of course, you have strange people everywhere. So this would be something. I think we shouldn't try everything new. We have it all there in place. Let's try to not create a fairy tale. Of course, there are problems between migrant groups and native groups, but let's just concentrate on people who just want to be part of something. And let's try to take them with us, not leave them behind. Yeah, that would be it. This is what I would like to, yeah, people not to understand, but just that's my message. Just try to go with people who want to change something, want to empower, want to be with their families, and yeah, try to ask yourself if the narrative is something you meet there in the streets.
Such a balanced viewpoint that, Alex, in terms of categorizing people. But again, that comes down from consideration on both the sides. And again, like absolutely brilliantly how you put, and again, I keep going back to that, but Klaus and Mohammed's idea in terms of how they
Yeah,
come together to build something beautiful. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
ties in. Sorry.
I'm just sorry, but Klaus, to make it very real, Klaus is not waking up every day and his first thought is how can I put barriers on Mohammed? It's not his first thought in the morning. Mainly Klaus is someone who wants to have a nice family, a nice wife, like same with Mohammed. So why not stick to this
Yeah.
narrative?
So that ties in into our quick fire round. So I'll be asking you three very simple questions. It's your opportunity to give us a very quick fire answer to that. And my first question to you is, given the work you've done over the last decade, um, what is it that one piece of your research on migrant and refugee entrepreneurship which you want, if given an opportunity, you would want every policymakers to read?
hmm I would like very much to focus on the relational trinity of embeddedness, connectedness, and belongingness. Because
You could give a shout out to your. I think you're having a big event early next year, if I
yes,
believe.
yeah,
Yeah, that'd be an ideal place, isn't it, to talk
yes,
about belongingness, embeddedness, and connectedness.
yes. This is the relational side of the entrepreneurial reality. So this is what I would like people to have a look at. Yeah.
Now, I'll take you back in your evidence-based research which you've done. Can you tell us a very, very small story about someone, an innovation, or you think they've done something which really stuck with you till today? A story which has really inspired you in any way in your academic work, in your research work, getting out there in the society?
Yeah, I can remember one specific woman, and she was discriminated from the beginning. Like she entered Germany at the age of, I guess, 5, and she was discriminating, at school everywhere. And then she tried to start a business, and while starting it, she did not get any location in a specific neighborhood where a privileged neighborhood, because she had a Turkish surname and nobody wanted her. Like if you are a fancy Italian restaurant, you can be there, but not as a Turkish woman. And but what she did, and this is so impressive, she stepped into her own power, and she became member of chambers of commerce, where she then tried to push herself, into this board positions, where she was always trying to change things for migrants. And she also herself founded a network for female migrant entrepreneurs. And she's an example today. When I think about her, it's so crazy, She never gave up. She is a single mother, and she is, this is an example of not being a victim at all, just like saying, you know what, you don't want me here. Okay, yeah, maybe you don't like my nose, maybe you don't like my haircut, maybe it's my surname, it's something about me you don't like. I don't care. I just leave you behind and move forward. And this is just one of the examples. I could tell you so many. Sometimes I'm sitting here and thinking about all these people, and yeah, I'm so I cannot, I mean, who am I? But I'm so proud they did it. It's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's absolutely brilliant. My last question in the quick fire round, and then we move on to closing the
Yeah.
episode, would be, I can see you are a very passionate researcher, and I've known you for some time now in terms of and you're very positive as well with all your work. So what I want to ask you is, can you share with us a hope when it comes to inclusive ecosystem? And the reason I say ecosystem is because that's the word we're all talking about.
Yeah.
But what is your hope when it comes to having a real inclusive ecosystem in and around us for everyone?
Yeah. So my hope is that if you have someone from outside visiting your region, and that one is, in talks or talking to policymakers or other people in the ecosystem, they take you to areas that some today call deprived, because they are 90, 80, 90% in migrant, as full of migrant population, migrant population. And then you go with them through the streets and you say, look, this is our international food cluster. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And we are happy we have that here. You have, I don't know, Polish restaurants here, Turkish restaurants here. You have Arabic restaurants here. If you want to take any of that food, just do it, That's inclusive ecosystem, valuing everybody, not labeling deprived areas as deprived areas. What is deprived about them? Let's be real. Because they have 80, 90% migrant population. Is this deprived? I don't know if we just need this narrative to be, again, the helpers, if we feel better if there is someone in a deprived area. Yeah. So I would say this is totally inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem, whatever an entrepreneurial ecosystem is, but that's another discussion.
Thank you for pushing out that definition. And on that note, Alex, thank you so much. It has been, I've thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. It was very, very insightful. And to my audience, I would say, in terms of all of you listening, I would really want you to go and have a look at Alex's work. She's done some fabulous work in this space. And she's really talking about entrepreneurship from a very different lens. And that lens, like she mentioned in a closing note, in terms of how inclusive in every sense, diverse in every sense, and trying to understand. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, we are not talking about creating that huge economic value, but it's about understanding the people in and around you, connecting with them, embedding with them, and trying to belong in a society which is very, very fragile as of now. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you again in another episode.
Thank you very much, Tabish. See you then.
Thank you.